On today's show, we look at Team USA's roster and make some predictions for them. Where is James Higgins going to play, and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikash, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be continuing World Juniors Week with the predictions for the Team USA roster. We'll look at the forwards in the first segment, we'll look at the defensemen and the goalies in the second segment, and then in the third segment, we'll be looking at some predictions for this year's roster. Does James Higgins stay on the top line? Does Stiga-Buium is Stiga-Buium going to be the top defenseman in the World Juniors? It's lining up for that so far, and a lot more there in the final segment. So stick around for that. But just before we get into any of this episode, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get right into it here with Team USA's rosters at forward. And they played a game against Slovakia over the weekend, a pre-tournament game. And the first line lined up as James Higgins at center with Gabe Perreault at his left and Ryan Leonard on his right, which has been the line all year so far in Boston College. How's that line going to produce together so far? I mean, we've seen these guys play together already. They're already pretty good. The chemistry is going to be there. That's just going to continue in this tournament, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I believe this is the only line in the entire tournament that has been playing this entire season together already, and not and in a massive role as well. Like these three players have been the offensive drivers of one of the best NCAA teams in college hockey this season, and James Higgins has just stepped into that Will Smith spot so seamlessly, while also bringing a lot more pace and dynamism to the equation for this line. It's changed a little bit how they function at the NCAA level, and I mean, for all those that have been watching that Smith-Perreault-Leonard combination over the past 3 or 4 seasons, can definitely be excited this year to see how Higgins impacts that line here at the international level. And he's such a terrific playmaker. You might even see Gabe Perreault explore his goal scoring a little bit more this season, because Higgins' playmaking lean is even stronger than Will Smith's was previously. So you're going to see both Perreault and Leonard be really capable goal scorers. And I mean, of course, Ryan Leonard is going to be one of the big contenders to score the most goals at this tournament. He's the most polished forward that's going to be at this tournament overall, in my opinion. He's so physical. He's plays such a direct style, always initiating contact. He's such a great power forward goal scorer, but the two-way game is also so high end that he's going to help insulate Perreault and Higgins a little bit against counterattacks against the better teams at this tournament. I think that in terms of balance, whether it be defensively and offensively, or in terms of player styles as well, of power forward and playmakers and high IQ guys, these three players mesh together so wonderfully, and you're going to see them create a bunch of offense all tournament long, both at even strength and on the power play.
Absolutely. Let's move right on to the second line here. Trevor Connelly, Danny Nelson, and Cole Eiserman. We have 2 Islanders draft picks on that second line in Nelson and Eiserman, playing next to Trevor Connelly, a Vegas Golden Knights first rounder, and a highly skilled transition player. He can break ankles so easily in transition with that speed, with that handling skill, and the playmaking continues to grow more and more with Connelly. So placing him next to a goal scorer, an opportunistic goal scorer like Cole Eiserman, and a two-way center in Danny Nelson makes a ton of sense. I think there's some names at center down low in this roster that could move their way up with better performances. I'm looking at Oliver Moore, Joey Willis, Kerry Terrance. There might be a rotation there at second line C, but I understand the combination of skills there. You've got Connelly's going to be handling a lot of the transition work, skating the puck up the ice. You got Danny Nelson, who's going to be a physical two-way force, and then you have Cole Eiserman to the right, who's just going to rifle pucks like nobody else in this group. Eiserman's in a great spot to be able to score a ton of goals. He's probably going to be playing the top power play. As much as his shot is ridiculous, I think that Ryan Leonard still edges him out in terms of pure goal scoring ability. Not in terms of pure shot. We all know Cole Eiserman's shot is by far the best in this group, but Ryan Leonard is going to score more goals because not only the role and who he's playing with, but also the intensity, the two-way details, the maturity in this game is really going to help him get to the right spot and get a lot more low slot opportunities. So yeah, I think with Danny Nelson, what's going to stay interesting with him is just the two-way game. He's going to really be the stopgap for those two, allowing those two a lot more creative freedom to move up the ice, to create offensively. But let's talk about the center on that third line. Oliver Moore, third line center so far for Team USA, playing next to Teddy Stiga and Brody Ziemer. Do you predict? Well, I mean, we'll get into the predictions in detail later on, but do you think Moore could stay on that line, or do you think he has a chance to move up to the second line center role?
I think he's the second best center in this lineup in terms of pure abilities, and I do think he would complement Eiserman and Connelly really nicely on that second line with his speed and defensive abilities specifically, really helping to insulate those two guys. That said, if he's playing on this third line, I still think he's going to be a really important piece of this Team USA lineup, while also giving him perhaps more opportunities against lesser competition to really score and leverage his speed to just blow past defenses. And if he's playing with the two wingers that he lined up with in this pre-tournament game, I think they could combine really, really nicely. He played that game between Teddy Stiga and Brody Ziemer, two wingers that were playing a lot together last season with the NTDP and who bring quite different things to the equation. Stiga is a pacey playmaker from the wing, really skilled, really underrated offensive producer and offensive creator, whereas Brody Ziemer is a heart and soul kind of player. He gives his all every single shift, plays with intensity, initiates contact. Not the biggest guy in the world, but he's definitely a physical style of guy. And he's a player that I think was a really smart pick for the Buffalo Sabres this past draft. And he's also going to be able to bring some depth leadership to the equation for Team USA. And with that balance, I think you have a good defensive foundation for that third line to play heavy matchups. But you also have three players that are quite opportunistic offensive creators off the rush and also in terms of creating down low in the offensive zone, finding pockets of space and creating in those perhaps tighter games where there's perhaps a bit less room to work with. Yeah. Whereas perhaps against the Kazakhstans and the lesser teams in this tournament of the world, you're not going to see that line pop off massively offensively because they're going to be a bit more solid on the defensive side, and you're going to see the top six just hounding pucks in the offensive zone. But against those more compact structures, against perhaps the weaker parts of those defensive teams, I think that third line could do a lot of damage. But talk me through the fourth line, because we have it perhaps landing a bit differently than how USA lined up in this pre-tournament game, because Joey Willis is one of our favorite depth players on this team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the line against Slovakia was a big third line. Augustine-Burnevik, 6'3", 195 pounds. Perreault-Hagens-Leonard, 6'1.5", 190, and then Brandon Svoboda on the right wing, 6'3", 208. So big third line, big fourth line is going to be playing a lot of physical, forechecking minutes. But I think it's just a matter of time before Team USA realizes just how efficient Joey Willis is in physical scenarios, despite being 5'10.5", 185. And I think he's going to replace Burnevik on that fourth line. So the fourth line that we have predicted is Joey Willis, Perreault-Hagens, and Brendan Svoboda. An effective, intense, hard-nosed, forechecking fourth line. That's going to be able to play some matchup minutes. Perreault-Hagens is a phenomenal player on both sides of the ice, and he's able to suppress opposing top forwards really well. So when do or die shifts, late in the game, you're up by a goal, you want to protect the lead, and your top guys are tired, just throw that fourth line out. They'll do a phenomenal job. And I think Joey Willis will complement those two really well as well. He's an intense, intelligent forechecker with some offensive skill as well. I really like his game, and I think he fits wonderfully on that fourth line. So I think it's just a matter of time before USA realizes that the 5 inches he gives up to Augustine-Burnevik, he more than makes up for with effort, will, drive, and skill. So it's going to be a very, very interesting fourth line. But that's our first segment done regarding the forwards for Team USA. So the outsiders right now are Max Plante and Augustine-Burnevik in our predictions. We'll get into the defensemen as well. Team USA has 8 defensemen in this tournament. We'll talk about them in detail in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors over at PrizePicks.
Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your other favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it really easy to cash out so you can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week on Prize Picks, I'm eyeing the hockey board, looking at Jack Hughes for more than 4 shots on goal and Artemi Panarin for more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make my picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here. We'll talk about the defensemen for Team USA in this roster, and it's an interesting group of players with one real top-end name at the very top of this group of defensemen. Ziv-Buium, for me, by far and away, is the best defenseman in this group. He has been something else. He's been a monster this year in Denver, just absolutely dominant. I don't think I've ever seen a draft plus 1 defenseman in the NCAA dominate to the level that we've seen from Ziv-Buium, and I'm including Luke Hughes in that conversation. He has been absolutely phenomenal for Denver so far this year. And Ziv-Buium was a phenomenal pickup by the Minnesota Wild at 12th overall. They traded up to get him at 12th overall in the 2024 NHL draft. Jet Lutsenko went 13th, and Konstantin Helenius went 14th to the Buffalo Sabres. I think that's going to come back to bite those two teams, especially Philadelphia, who traded down from that 12th overall spot. Buium is absolutely phenomenal. 6-foot left shot defender. He's going to dominate this group. Insane offensively. His defensive game continues to improve and has become a true focal point of his game. He's able to suppress the rush. He's able to defend in zone. Like, what can this kid not do, especially at this level?
Dominate physically is probably the one thing that you could outline there, but even then, he more than treads water physically. I mean, he's not the biggest defenseman, but some really good contact initiation habits and really good low center of gravity to resist pressure and not get knocked off of his skates on the ice against bigger, more physical opponents. But as you mentioned, he is the standout name here on the blue line. All the offense coming from the back is going to be going through Ziv-Buium at this tournament for Team USA, and it's kind of interesting to see who he's been paired with in these pre-tournament games, because on the first pairing, the U.S. have him playing with Drew Fortescue, who's a very solid defensive defenseman, not a guy that likes to activate much into the offensive zone. He's not very dynamic. He's not overly skilled either. And he also lacks that punishing physical quality. So what made him the player that USA is selecting to play with Ziv-Buium? How does he complement Buium's toolkit?
Yeah, so he's a really good stopgap. He's really good at staying available on breakouts, and I think Buium really needs that on his deep pair. You don't want a defenseman who's kind of shy of being able to handle pucks on the breakout and pass them out. Be the east-west pass available to his other deep partner, and you don't want a guy who's just bombing up the ice the first chance he gets either. Fortescue's really smart at just staying available on breakouts. It's going to make Buium's job incredibly easy in terms of getting the puck out of his zone, and he's going to be tasked with that a ton for Team USA. So I think that combination works really, really well, especially when you look at the fact that Drew Fortescue plays with the Boston College Eagles, the same roster, the same group as the first line, Perreault-Hagens and Leonard. So those 5 are going to be playing a really cohesive game. I think that's going to be very interesting for them. But the second pair is really interesting as well. You have an undersized left shot offensive defenseman in Cole Hutson, and you have a 6'5" right shot defenseman, a right shot shutdown defenseman in Adam Kleber there. So Hutson was a second-round pick of the Washington Capitals in the 2024 draft, and Kleber was the same, a second-round pick, but of the Buffalo Sabres in the 2024 draft. Combination of skills that works really well. Hudson's going to be carrying the puck up the ice, creating off of zone entries, being the stretch passer on breakouts. And Adam Kleber's job is going to be very, very simple. Uses great skating for his size to suppress the rush, to get the puck free, and either he or Cole Hutson can get the retrieval and get the puck out. They're going to be a rush suppressing D pair, and Kleber's going to be handling a lot of those defensive scenarios. Hudson's likely going to be the rover in the defensive zone, going to be the guy who's going to be kind of identifying threats and skating around, whereas Kleber's going to be more of the net front box out defenseman. So great combination of skills there. We've seen this we've seen this song before. Small offensive defenseman with a big defensive defenseman. That usually works pretty well, especially at this tournament. So decent pair of prospects there. But talk me through the third pair. Colin Ralph and Ralph-Minnetian so far for Team USA, and we predict that to be how they start. Is that necessarily going to be how they finish? We'll talk about that in the third segment. But for the moment, Colin Ralph, Ralph-Minnetian, what are their games like, and how are they going to complement each other?
Yeah, it's an interesting third pairing here, where on the left-hand side, you have the biggest defenseman. I believe he's bigger than Adam Kleber by an inch in Colin Ralph.
The opposite.
6 foot. Oh, it's the opposite. Kleber's 6'6". Oh boy, that's fun. I adore that second pairing. By the way, you wanted to mention that too. Like Hutson and Kleber were two of my favorite blue liners from last year's USA class, and I think that they're incredibly complementary. They're going to work so nicely together. But back to the third pairing. Colin Ralph, second biggest defenseman on this blue line for Team USA at 6'5", 227 pounds. He's quite mobile. He's really good at defending the rush. He leverages his range and his mobility really effectively to just take away time and space against rushing attackers. He's logged a goal and 4 points so far this season with St. Cloud University in the NCAA, playing a top 4 role all season long, playing 22 minutes a night as a freshman in college after being drafted in the second round by the St. Louis Blues this past draft. So he's going to be perhaps the more shutdown element on that third pairing. You're probably going to see a bit more limitations in his offensive activations, even relative to what he's been doing at the NCAA level this season, because Ralph-Minnetian is a lot more of that activating type. He's a bit smaller as a right shot defenseman. He activates a lot. He likes to have the puck on his stick. He's a good distributor. Wouldn't call him a pure playmaker, but he's a guy that can be a bit of a focal point on the blue line in the offensive zone during the cycle to distribute play and find teammates, and also a guy that has a decent amount of chemistry with a bunch of players on this lineup, whether it be from his college career or previous to that with the NTDP. So that's one of the benefits with the USA and international competitions at the junior level. So many of these players have already played extended periods with each other. There's a good base of chemistry to build off of with these tournaments, whereas for many of the other teams, especially with like Team Canada, for instance, where players are spread out throughout the entire country and never really play together, apart from perhaps small tournaments like the NCAA CHL showdown that we saw just earlier this month. But I think that you have a third pairing here that's very interesting for Team USA. A decent balance of puck moving and physicality, which is kind of what they're going for in this lineup, as we see with all three pairings. But to wrap things up here, talk me through the last two defensemen that cracked this roster that are currently on that fourth pairing for Team USA, and that's Paul Fischer, an Edmonton Oilers prospect, and Logan Hensler, another draft eligible.
Yeah, so Paul Fischer is just your meat and potatoes defensive defenseman. Decent skater, is going to stop defensive rushes. He's going to be able to play in zone defense pretty comfortably when he slots into this lineup, perhaps against lower end teams. Whereas Logan Hensler is a bit more of your daring push the pace offensive defenseman. He's able to skate up the ice, make plays offensively. But he's been a bit bland this year, for lack of better words. So, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to crack this top six, but he's got a great opportunity to perhaps outperform Ralph-Minnetian on that third pair, to get onto that pair with Colin Ralph and have a bit better defensively presence on that third pair. But we'll see how that goes. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into the actual predictions of the of Team USA's roster here. What we have is kind of either hot or cold takes, that kind of stuff, and the goaltenders as well, which we need to mention as well. We'll get into that in just a sec, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a dub. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It is thrilling. You can also take your swings on who you think is going to get the most interceptions in a game between the two teams, as well as any other number of different swings that you can take in the football realm. You can also take your swings outside of that, whether it's with European football with the Champions League, golf or tennis, or if you're listening to this podcast, just maybe hockey is your sport of choice. Whatever it may be, FanDuel has something to offer every kind of sports fan. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment. We'll be talking about the goaltenders and Team USA's predictions here for the 2025 World Juniors. And let's start off with the goaltenders. This is pretty much the easiest of the bunch here. It's going to be Trey Augustine, and there's zero doubt about it in the starting crease for Team USA. He's got a .930 save percentage so far this year in 14 games in Michigan State with a 1.98 goals against average for a team that isn't all that good. He's been the main reason why they're so effective. He's got an 11-2-1 record so far for Michigan State. A phenomenal netminder, technically sound, incredible footwork. He's able to seal his posts incredibly well. So good with plays that go behind his net. He's very, very aware and very smart in terms of when to go left to right post when the puck's behind the net. So very, very interesting goaltender. I really like what I've seen from him since his draft year, and he's continued to outperform all expectations. He's by far the starter for this team. The question resides in who's going to be the backup. I think between Hampton Slukynsky and Sam Hillebrandt is going to be Hampton Slukynsky, mainly because he's playing in the NCAA, whereas Hillebrandt is playing in the OHL. That's always something that Team USA favors. I think that Slukynsky is just going to edge out Hillebrandt in the backup net there for Team USA. But let's get right into the predictions. First and foremost, does Logan Hensler play in the top 6 at some point for Team USA in this tournament? What do you think?
I think it's very possible, especially because I don't think he's going to be cracking the top 4 in any capacity. I think that Hutson-Kleber and Buium are already going to lock down those top 4 roles on the right side. That said, Ralph-Minnetian on the third pairing, as we mentioned, is a puck-moving defenseman, isn't the most physical. The defensive lackings are sometimes concerns, definitely less so this season than in past years. He continues to refine his off-puck and defensive value, but Logan Hensler is a pretty polished and refined off-puck player. Yeah. He's not overly dynamic. He's not going to create a bunch of offensive advantages, but he's a solid, intelligent player who makes the right, simple play the vast majority of the time. So in games where perhaps things don't feel very solid for USA and they want a little bit more consistency from the back end, bumping Hensler into that third pairing role on the right side, I think would really help settle things down a little bit and to quiet play down, especially against bottom 6s of teams like Team Canada, for instance, where you still have such amazing talent offensively. Ralph-Minnetian is going to do his best, but he's not going to dominate in the defensive zone by any capacity, whereas Logan Hensler might in the right situation. So we definitely think it's possible that he jumps up the lineup a little bit. But do you think that Buium stays on the right side, or could you see Team USA switching him to the left and maybe moving right shot defenseman up? Because that would kind of change the equation entirely here on the blue line, because he is the one lefty playing on the right side currently.
Absolutely. I think that's a possibility. But at the same time, Buium is so comfortable on the right side. We've seen it all year. Last year with Denver, he's played on the right side comfortably next to left shot defenseman. That's where he's most comfortable. That's kind of the situation in which he's played the most frequently in his draft year. So I think it would take a lot it would take Drew Fortescue being really bad for them to switch that around. I don't think it's going to happen. Fortescue is phenomenal. So I think that first pair stays at it as it is. And I think Buium is going to be the top defenseman in this World Juniors group by far and away. Listen, I love Axel Sandin-Pellikka. What he's been doing so far in the SHL this year has been absolutely phenomenal. Buium's a monster. He's on a fully different level this year, and continues to just add more and more layers to both his offensive and defensive games, to the point where I don't think it's going to be particularly close. Buium's going to be the best defenseman in this group. That's my prediction for this year's World Juniors and for Team USA's roster. Buium's going to be trusted with top power play minutes, top penalty kill minutes. He's going to be playing top pair minutes. Every situation you want him to play, he's going to be able to handle wonderfully. I think there's no doubt about it. Buium is the best defenseman at this World Juniors. But let's talk about James Hagens for a second, because he's garnering a ton of attention. He's still at first overall on our rankings at Elite Prospects. Does he stay at 1C for Team USA? I think it's pretty likely given who he's playing with, but what kind of scenario would you see happen where Hagens gets bumped out of second line center?
If things just don't work for USA, like they're hoping it does in the first couple games of the tournament, maybe you see them try to switch things up and maybe distribute the offense a little bit more between their top 9 lines, and maybe bump Oliver Moore up to complement Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard, who's already played with them in the past as well. They're all in the same class. I think that would be a possibility. And then seeing like James Hagens play with Eiserman and Connelly, who he also has experience playing with. There's a lot of like shuffling around that they could do. That said, I don't think that the best line in college hockey today is going to get switched up at the World Junior Championships. I think they're going to stick together. I believe he's going to stay at 1C. I don't really think you're going to see any changes on that top line for Team USA, barring an injury or something unexpected happening in terms of the early results at the tournament. So I think that the chances are quite safe that he's going to stay on that top line for the US. But talk me through Oliver Moore. We kind of teased this earlier on in the show of kind of thinking how he would function between Eiserman and Connelly on the second line instead of Danny Nelson. What would he bring to the game that Nelson doesn't in that top 6?
Well, the way I see it, it's speed. I think that's the main difference between the two. As much as Danny Nelson's able to build up speed on longer distances, he's less of an efficient and evasive skater than Oliver Moore. If you're looking for someone who's going to be able to help Trevor Connelly and shoulder Trevor Connelly's ability to carry the puck up the ice, to create off the rush, if you want to really double down on rush offense, you bump up Oliver Moore to that second line, 100%. I think what Danny Nelson brings that Oliver Moore doesn't is size and physicality. He's 6'3", 212 pounds. That definitely plays in their favor, because as much as Cole Eiserman is a bigger body and he's pretty heavy, he's a 6 foot, 200 pound forward. We're talking about a prospect who tends to avoid physical scenarios more than anything else, and usually prefers to stay as the third man out in a cycle play as the F3, find a little pocket of space and shoot. That's his game. So if Oliver Moore gets overwhelmed physically, the only other prospect left in that case is Trevor Connelly. And as much as I like Trevor Connelly, he's an open ice skill guy. He's not a forechecking demon, right? Danny Nelson brings that middle ground where you have that physicality, you have that defensive ability that Oliver Moore does. You have the defensive ability that Oliver Moore does. You have a bit less of kind of transition skill and speed, but at least you have that physicality to rely upon on the forecheck, off the cycle. That brings another dimension. So I understand that line. I still personally prefer what a second line of Trevor Connelly, Oliver Moore, and Cole Eiserman could bring together. The amount of creation that second line brings it more than compensates for the lack of cycle offense and forechecking that might occur from that line. And that frees up Danny Nelson to be a true third line center with Teddy Stiga and Brody-Ziemer, and he and Ziemer are going to wreak havoc on the forecheck. Right, like that's inevitable, and which frees up Stiga to be the playmaker, to be the more kind of finesse player on that line, and connect with those two in the slot, for example. So that's how I would do it. But there's a reason why I'm not on Team USA's coaching staff. That second line still works wonderfully together. To close things off here, is Ryan Leonard going to be the top goal scorer at the World Juniors? Not for Team USA, top goal scorer at the World Juniors. What do you think?
I'd give it a 50-50 shot. I think he's certainly the favorite for that award at this tournament. We've seen him do it time and time again internationally at the college level with the NTDP. Wherever he goes, he scores goals and does so in a tremendously NHL fashion. I cannot point to you the last Ryan Leonard goal that I've seen that you could not see at the NHL level. He only scores goals that professionals would score. He's so pacey, so intense, so physical, so middle driven, but also opportunistic, has that soft skill as well. A really dynamic puck carrier when he wants to be, and he isn't always that. He often keeps his puck touches short, plays quick give and goes with Gabe Perreault and James Hagens, but having that element in his toolbox to just go for a solo rush is something that can really open up the game for Team USA. So he's a player I definitely think is going to be the favorite for the award. But which players do you think could contend with him? Because there aren't that many high-end contenders that come to mind, because Leonard is such a high-end goal scorer.
Listen, Easton Cowan seems to be scoring goals at will so far through this pre-tournament, but it's pre-tournament. I think the most likely contender for him would probably be Bradley Nadeau. Nadeau has a phenomenal release. One of the best releases I've ever seen. But he hasn't been using it as much so far through these two pre-tournament games against Switzerland and Sweden. So if that continues, if he continues to be the more connective kind of playmaking element on that first line with Cal Ritchie and Easton Cowan, there's going to be no competition at all for Ryan Leonard for the top goal scorer. That wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of December and close off World Juniors Week. This has been Hadi Kalikesh with Sebastian High. Happy holidays, and we hope you tune in next time.